Sydney, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you today, Hunter?
I'm doing great. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from just outside of Toronto, Canada.
Oh, very nice. How is it in Toronto today?
It's very hot and sticky. And it's my dog is outside on the patio. She's loving it. I'm just like, you have fun. I'll be inside in the AC.
Yeah, cool. Well, my dog does that. I call it the baked potato.
hmm
So, Sydney, I'd love to hear a bit about your journey and why this topic is part of your passion and your life now.
Yeah, I think it's part of my passion in my life because actually in 2017, I experienced trauma at the hands of an army man. And so I was like, a lot of people think, PTSD, they think of the military, they think of veterans, they think of soldiers. And some of my PTSD came directly from a soldier who, was in training and had to go off to do different things that the military requires. And so I kind of want to break down the stigma around PTSD and what that actually looks like on a day to day, how it impacts someone. And so I studied human resources at school while the incident occurred and realized that human resources, especially with mental health, wasn't really aware of the accommodations of looking at that for mental health and neurodiversity. And so I kind of made it my mission to talk about these things and bring more light to them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's really an honor to have you here today because I think this is an extremely important and I would say unfortunately overlooked topic
Mhm.
in the disabilities and neurodiverse communities. So let's set the stage a little bit and let's invite people in to break some of this maybe the misconceptions I
Mhm.
have. What is PTSD and how does it manifest in individuals?
Yeah, so there's PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's also complex PTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and recognizing that it can manifest differently depending on the individual. And usually it manifests, sometimes the trauma itself isn't what causes the PTSD. It's a lack of care, it's the lack of support, it's a lack of understanding what just happened, and we have traumatic experiences that we deal with and we face. And it's really the aftermath. Okay, how do we process what just happened? How do we get care for what just happened to us? And so it can manifest in many ways. And I think a lot of times people think, oh, flashbacks, nightmares are the most common things people think of, but it's so much more than that. And even, for example, CPTSD, it's more emotional flashbacks. So, in the movie, in how media portrays it, is a big flashback, you are suddenly back there. But sometimes you can just feel the emotions that you're back there instead and be overwhelmed in your head and avoiding certain situations. And so it manifests very differently, and very differently than how media portrays it.
Yeah, it's become a trope, right? In war
Yes.
movies and things like that, and the cold sweats waking up in the
hmm
middle of the night and they're there or they're at work and then they're suddenly not present and they're
hmm
because they're like reenacting something that's happening. And like you said, it's this visceral, emotional
hmm
experience that can happen and overtake an experience. So it's not necessarily like these flashback scenes, but it's
hmm
actually something I think more people can actually relate to than they might expect now that we understand a little more.
Yeah, and I think also, I think a lot of people think the symptoms are very physical and or outwards towards other people because you see in movies, some people scream or people are acting violent towards others. But mostly the violence is towards ourselves and we're like
Mm,
beating ourselves up internally. And someone could just be staring blankly and having a whole war in their head.
yeah, yeah. So now that we understand a bit more about what it is, what it's like,
Mhm.
what would you say are specific accommodations that workplaces can implement to support individuals with PTSD that ensure their well-being and their productivity at the workplace?
First and foremost, asking the individual what they need. It's like I see that you're struggling. I don't know what exactly you're dealing with, but how can I support you? Um, Even just having a conversation, oh, something, an anniversary of a traumatic event. They don't have to necessarily say that, but that something's coming up that, it's kind of a rough time for me. This is how you can support me this going week. And I think first and foremost, taking people at face value when they say that they're experiencing PTSD or they're experiencing some kind of struggle coming up this coming week, or that they're going to need, so that would include like, job modification or job reallocation of the tasks, being able to focus, maybe the focus is going to be an issue more, and just understanding that that can be an issue, looking at, having quiet rooms or having quiet headsets or things, because sometimes noises can be a trigger, or sometimes more jumpy when already on edge, and, you know, and really understanding that, also modifying break schedules or modifying, being flexible, having flexible work schedules, allowing people to have that space, sometimes needing that more of a break, that mental break, because just so much work, and sometimes, or to need less break, to keep the mind occupied whether at work. And what does that look like? Because some person might be like, oh, this work is too much, it's overloading me, my brain's already crowded with so much stuff, I need more breaks and more frequently. But another person can be like, I want to be distracted. If I keep busy and keep doing my work, then that would be preferred. And so also writing job tasks and having written instructions instead of having verbal instructions, because that might have that understanding that, oh, some feel like someone's yelling at them or might be a little bit more sensitive. And so just writing out the instructions, having, okay, can refer to it later if the brain fog, and getting distracted is there. So writing out the instructions, it's like, oh, I can refer back to it later, do my work, and having those systems in place is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question from the audience here. Leanne Lee asks, what are your thoughts on acquired neurodivergence as a result of PTSD or CPTSD? Do you see a correlation there?
I do see a correlation. I think mental health in general is like, understanding, and that's under the umbrella of neurodiversity, because it impacts, how you behave, how you interact, how you think. And so that can be, that acquired neurodiversity. And it really shapes how your mind is, developing. And so I actually had two workshops that I did. It was like neurodiversity as, as trauma, because being neurodivergent, you're actually more susceptible to trauma, and trauma as a type of neurodiversity, because again, it impacts how you show up, might wanna, it impacts how you view yourself and how you view others. And so it impacts all these different things. So I completely agree that it can be acquired neurodivergence. Even you can identify as being neurodivergent if you have CPTSD/PTSD.
Yeah, yeah. So, what ways does experiencing trauma influence our behavior, our performances, and interactions in professional settings? How can that show up?
Yeah, well, it impacts how we show up in everyday life. And so professional setting is part of that. And so impacts how we behave, how we interact with our peers or our co-workers or higher ups or our managers, might have that misconception of what a power dynamic looks like in the workplace. It's like, is the person, bossing me around? Are they, is it on that territory? What does that look like? Can also can positively and also negatively impact our performance, depending, kind of like I was talking about with accommodations, that sometimes it could lead us to seem more productive. And however, it's like that could lead to burnout quicker, because it's like, I'm just go, 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 distract the mind, not really dealing with the root cause. And so it could look like good performance on paper at first, and then it could do a 180, and then negatively impact the performance, or just completely, again, with that anniversary coming up to the traumatic event, the actual day of the, and it's like, oh, the person had a bad performance today. And so I think a lot of times in organizations, in the professional setting, it's like, oh, it kind of has to be consistent. But as human beings, we're not consistent. So we're going to have good and bad days. If, someone that has PTSD, it's sometimes a little bit more extreme or more evident. And so just being patient with yourself and being patient with, your employees or your coworkers when they're going through something, and really talking to, they don't have to disclose that, it's like, oh, but I was having a rough period there, and that's where my performance was so negatively impacted. And having those things, having plans ahead of time, having performance plans ahead of time, to actually be like, hey, this is what happens yearly. This is, like, for example, even having a parent pass away, that could be pretty traumatic and can cause CPTSD, there wasn't enough care there. And so, parents had the anniversary of someone's death, and that's more understandable to employer for some reason. And so understanding that, okay, once a year, you have this period in your life that something happened, and being receptive to that, and I was like, okay, what do you need from us to still set you up for success? You need to be off that week, off that day. You need modified duties. What does that actually look like in reality?
Yeah. I also really resonate with hearing you say being patient with ourselves if we're
Mhm.
experiencing that. What are some effective tools for folks that maybe are going through a hard time and maybe are being extra hard on
Mhm.
themselves?
Yeah, I think recognizing why you're being hard on yourself, or you know, it's easier said than done. I remember when I first when I talked about the beginning, the experience with the army man, and I was being so hard on myself because it wasn't that bad, and kind of diminish that, or just like, well, I still have to work hard. I still need to reach my goals. But that, so just being like, that burnout that comes with it, recognizing that you deserve the care you give to others. So you give so much care to
Mm,
other people. Why would you not give that care to yourself? Or,
mm,
like a lot of this trying to get back to who you were before the trauma, before the PTSD. And there is no going back, unfortunately. It's just moving forward, growing around that spot, and continuously, showing up for yourself, doing proactive self-care instead of reactive self-care. And so I actually have a self-care to-do list now. I love to-do lists. I have a work to-do list, a volunteer to-do list. And I realized that I was doing better in my journey, and then realized that I was really, really struggling again with experiencing flashbacks and nightmares of what happened. And I was like, I wasn't being proactive in my self-care. I was being reactive. And so I was like, I like to do lists. So I started making even just brushing my teeth, doing my workouts, doing my yoga is all on that to-do list. And it does make a difference. It's me choosing myself.
yeah. Choosing ourselves is, we can't show up for others if we don't show up for
Mhm.
ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. If I skip those basic needs for myself,
Hmm.
taking a break, walking around, clearing my head, petting my dog,
Hmm.
drinking plenty of water, making sure I eat lunch, stretching, maybe meditation, whatever those, if I start to let them all, I don't have to do them all every single day, but if they all start to go away, then my thread starts to come
Hmm.
undone. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about folks not needing to necessarily disclose, but what are effective strategies for individuals to disclose their PTSD status to employers or to colleagues so they can balance personal privacy while also workplace needs?
I think it starts from the policy and procedures thing for employers and for human resources, because even looking at discrimination and harassment policies, these are in every company, but a lot of times they're not written with a trauma-informed lens. And so what, for example, when you're reporting, it's like, okay, you have to report, and then you have to come face to face with the perpetrator. And it's like, is that, fair to the survivor? Even using the term victim in that, using the term survivors, using the other terminology, using impacted individual, and reducing that language that's around it. There's such a
Hmm.
stigma around these things right now, and have been for a long time. So it's going to take a lot of work. But really looking at, okay, are you creating a culture where people feel like they can talk about things, even though, can they feel comfortable enough? Do they feel like they can disclose to you? And really evaluating your culture is, I think, the first step of actually implementing that, and seeing, having either like formally, doing a survey, or informally having conversations, depending again on your organizational culture, because we all have different organizations, and really understanding what that looks like in actuality. And I think, educating yourself and your team on PTSD, or, neurodiversity, and having that bigger talking about mental health and how someone shows up if they have mental health conditions or mental health in the workplace, and talking about mental wellness, and having wellness sessions, is a huge way of actually like, oh, okay, we care about your health. We know you're our employee, you're here to do a job, but we care about you fundamentally as human beings. And we want to provide you wellness tools. We want to provide you educational resources to know yourself and know others. And I think, with this educational assistant programs that offer, therapy and those sessions, but is it like you just doing that to, check that box, or just, do what's the bare minimum? And so really going beyond that. And I think also making a understanding that workplace adjustments can look different for everyone, and not assuming and accommodations for everyone, understanding that, oh, someone asked me that for that accommodation, that had a similar condition to you, and you're not disclosing who it was, but you're still saying that someone did. And so it's like, and it's, don't assume what people need. Ask, really have those conversations with your employees, get to know them, get to know, and for the for the coworkers as well as managers or human resources, being willing to ask questions or ask, hey, do you need help? And if the person says no, take them again at face value. But once they realize that, if someone asks you for help numerous times or asks if you need help, it's like, oh, the person actually seems to care if that I'm struggling. Making that relationship, really building up that relationship. It's like at first when asked, it's like, are they just wanting to take over my job? They're trying to be a control freak. Like, why are they asking me this? And then once you break that down, it's like, oh no, they keep asking me. They see something's wrong. You're more open to being more vulnerable and be more honest. And you'd be like, yes, I am struggling. I would like your help with X, Y, and Z.
I love that. And that also is showing that the person is checking in maybe more than once. That is someone that is empathetically inclined, because
Exactly.
they are picking up on what you're putting down on the table. And maybe it's little subtle things, but if that person is dialed in, that's a great first step to building that trust that you're speaking about. So, what other policies and practices should organizations adopt to handle confidential information about employees' PTSD diagnosis, sensitivity, it's being sensitive and ethical around that information, and fostering a supportive and inclusive workplace culture?
Yeah, having an accommodation policy, it's like, what does it look like? Because I think a lot of times accommodation is on physical disabilities, and that's so, so important. But a lot of times is not really understanding around someone that has mental health or that experiences, neurodiversity. And so really understanding, okay, how can you accommodate? Having a, outlining how you go about doing an accommodation plan for someone that's, dealing with mental health that could fluctuate or could look different every day. It's like, okay, days that I'm doing okay and I can do my job well, what does that look like? Okay, days that I'm kind of struggling, okay, it's an anniversary or something that happened, what does that accommodation look like that day? And really having that accommodation policy and procedure to outline to the company, this is what we do, these are the steps. And how to also maintain that confidentiality when someone asks for accommodation, and having those clear procedures. Even with the drug use and medication policies, taking account that people might have to take medication, sometimes working in a remote environment, might have to take medication on their lunch break, or even if they go to the on-site, might have to take medication on the, again, on the lunch break. And so people, there's a stigma around, oh, the medication is going to make them sleepy, make them drowsy, and it shouldn't be allowed here. What's the use of, the use of medical marijuana? What does that look like in the workplace? And how is that being managed? And again, reducing that stigma and really having these come from a trauma-informed lens and from those lived experiences. Oh, we lost Hunter.
Sorry, just I'm here.
And
Just
then
cut
I
out for
think
a second.
last but not least, having a training policy and procedure that outlines, okay, what's the training look like on an annual basis? How are we going beyond just, the bare minimum, and really outlining, talking about, again, mental health in the workplace, talking about PTSD in the workplace, talking about discrimination and harassment and how that could lead to trauma, and or someone that's already experienced, this outside of the workplace. So in another organization, before they came to this organization, what does that look like? There's so much work to be done, and policies are such a powerful tool. And I'm actually doing a lot of my consulting work right now, and I can see the difference it's making in the companies I'm working with. And I brought to them a couple of times, like talking about that PTSD lens with the discrimination and harassment policy, and they're like, "Oh, well, we never thought of that." and it's so important.
They don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we just have a few minutes left, and
Mhm.
I'd love to ask maybe a little outside the box question here. If you could give PTSD a superhero alter ego, shattering these
Mhm.
misconceptions and this black and white thinking about it, give it a complete makeover with a unique costume, superpowers, what would they be, and how would they help individuals cope in their daily lives?
Yeah, so I think the costume would have to be rainbow. This is like you said, the black and white thinking around PTSD, and how sometimes when you have PTSD, it's black and white thinking, it's all or nothing. And so really having that rainbow, that spectrum, that we can still have colorful lives, we can still, this find we and sometimes we even find more joy in everything, right? And so actually the year after, I got a tattoo that says "I see joy," and it was for one of the participants I work with, and that's what her name meant. But also, I chose to see the joy in the world after the blackness of the world and the darkness. And so I think also having superhuman strength to having tele-empathy, like telepathy, but tele-empathy, um, and really understanding that being empathetic, having that listening ear, having that ability to be empathetic and to make change and really hear people from where they're coming from and they're diverse in their perspectives and their experiences. And I think, having the ability to talk to animals, like talking to talking to her and really hearing from them and seeing the love they feel for us and that pure love, and how that's the pure love that with they don't talk to us, but imagine hearing them talk and hearing what they have to say to us. And then I think also endurance, continuously, and perseverance, and continuously choosing to get up in the morning, helping, keep going, you got this. Yes, it's a setback. Yes, you're gonna have days where you really struggle. You're gonna have bad days, you're gonna have bad moments in good days, but really having the endurance to still make a beautiful life for yourself.
I love that. I'm going to put that in my wardrobe so I can put that on each day. And I feel like that does show up in a lot of ways, as someone as well, I've suffered with PTSD, and
Hmm.
it's an ongoing process, right? And it
Yes.
has gotten better, but it's not always perfect, and there are those setback days.
Hmm.
And creating that circle of trust with people, whether, like you said, it's an empathetic coworker, or it's a trusted therapist or counselor, and that can give, from my own experience, give me the tools, like you said, that are those get me out of my black and white thinking
Hmm.
into my spectrum rainbow experience. Be like, okay, maybe this my day is really red today because I'm feeling pretty hot and pretty angry, but you know what, I can get back to those cool colors, and because I have the tools to use them now. So I love your outfit and I want it. So we just have a few minutes left, Sydney. What's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yeah, I think you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Sydney Elaine Butler. I think some people, I try to go by Sydney Elaine Butler as much as possible. Um, because Elaine's my middle name, but I like going by Sydney Elaine or Sydney Elaine Butler. And so sometimes people just type in Sydney Butler. It's like, nope, there's a Elaine in there. So make sure to put the Elaine in there. And then you can also connect with me. There's a form on my website, I believe, at accessiblecreates.ca. If you have any other questions or anything you want to talk about, you can reach out to me there as well.
I love that. I didn't put on my Zoom name today, but I've also been embracing my middle name again. I was like, my mother gave me this beautiful name and I need to start using it more. So it's in my email signature. So I appreciate that. Hunter Lee Canning. So I'm trying to bring that out
That
some more too.
flows.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just like Hunter Lee Canning. It flows off the tongue. She's so funny too, because she was like, well, just in case you want to change, if you don't want your last name anymore, I think Hunter Lee sounds good too. She's all about like make your own way. Bless her. Well, Sydney, this has been absolutely fantastic. I'd love to hear a little bit about that forum you have too. Tell me a little bit about that experience where people do some resources that you provide right out of the gate for folks.
Yeah, so the forum includes, ways that you can contact me, and also having different forms of like, okay, what exactly are you struggling with in this moment? So do you need accommodations? Do you need to talk about um training with you know, and all these different things?
That is so, so cool. And because we have a couple of minutes left, is there anything that maybe we didn't get to today that you think is really important that maybe is overlooked, or that you would want someone to take away from the conversation today?
I think really understanding that you're gonna have good and bad days, regardless if you have PTSD or not, and just be patient with yourself. And I think be proactive in your self-care instead of reactive.
I love that. Taking those moments to
Mm.
pause, right? Do you know, I'm sure you're familiar with
Mm.
HALT. Are you familiar with HALT?
That sounds familiar.
Oh, I love this one. This is not my own, this is my
Mhm.
therapist. HALT. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? For me,
Yeah.
usually, I'm usually hungry and therefore I'm angry and therefore I'm tired, sometimes lonely, but that's what a
Mhm.
dog is for. So that's how I take those moments to
Mhm.
pause and not be reactive and
Mhm.
just halt. Okay, yeah, I need a sandwich. My life isn't coming apart. I just need a sandwich.
I just need a cookie. It's fine.
Yeah, just a cookie, just a little sugar shot. That's all I need right now. Well, Sydney Elaine Butler, this was absolutely fantastic. I will be reaching out to you on LinkedIn. I hope everyone else does. Thank you so much for your radical vulnerability and your practical tools. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great rest of
Bye.
your day.
You too. Bye.